of what Mr. Johnson has done is a series of secret meetings with the United States. That's what happened to these meetings. Every single line of this document redacted out. Full market access for US products to our National Health Service. You're going to sell our National Health Service.
You know, the election, an election is going to take place in the UK on December 12th. Parliament is out of control, and the Prime Minister has no power to discharge, for the most part, anything that he wants, especially in the context of Brexit. And they've got their extension. They're going to have their election. The American audience is missing out. I do these videos because the American audience is missing out. Because of the imposition of Brexit, the politics in the UK has gotten, well, it's broken. They don't get this notion of leadership in this case. It is a notion of essentially warring tribes of people who want Brexit or don't want Brexit, and it crosses party lines. For up to this point, I want to talk about effectively how we got here, not in the span of 2 years, but just in the span of 2 months. And what you're going to see is move and counter move that have brought us to where we are right now, where as much as I love Corbyn got what he wanted in regards to tactics politically, but lost it all in getting what he wanted. I explain what I mean. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal, Patreon. They demonetize these videos from jump. So this content is really brought to you by you. Let's hop across the pond. Now, I am a fanatic for UK politics, especially when it gets to the point of this overt politicism. I don't care what the people say. I care what their intentions are. Meaning, I care what they want, because what they say usually runs in line with what they want, whether they're being deceptive or otherwise. It is fascinating politics. It's fascinating politics. I want to talk about how we got here, and only in like 2 months, because so much stuff was happening. Things were happening daily, day after day after day, where they would move and counter move. I want to talk about this very specifically, though, in the context of Boris Johnson versus Jeremy Corbyn, the warring tribes that these guys are the figureheads of, what they were trying to accomplish, what they ended up accomplishing, and how we got to the point of having an election on December 12th, and who that benefits versus who that disadvantages, and why. Because all of that stuff is important, and all of that stuff is utterly fascinating. A prime minister gets in office, and that prime minister has the same parliament as the previous prime minister. The previous prime minister was a walking corpse for several months, but for much of that time just failed in what she was put there to do, meaning get done Brexit. Boris Johnson gets in, same parliament, and immediately, first day at the office, loses the majority. He goes so far as to deselect, I think it was around 20 people who didn't toe his line, meaning 20 Tories that didn't toe his agenda, meaning the prime minister at this point has no power to discharge anything because he has no majority at all. This doesn't stop him from trying to get a deal from the standpoint of the EU, using a no-deal Brexit as a club or a stick to hold over the EU, because he knows the EU doesn't want an uncontrolled Brexit, because whatever they are, meaning they're not removed from that would adversely affect them, or at the very least, it's unpredictable in regards to how that would affect the EU. So he uses that as a stick. I will bash myself in the face, and it would hurt you also as I bash myself in the face, in order to try to get a deal. Against all belief, he gets a deal from the EU. Now, the politics and the standpoint from the Britain at that point, however, is the prime minister, I'm going to be dead in a ditch, or I'm going to be out here by October the 31st. Game on. So from the standpoint of the opposition parties that want to stop Boris Johnson, don't trust Boris Johnson, and want to get political concessions out of Boris Johnson, they take every ability, everything in their power, to seize Parliament from the Prime Minister and to stop him from doing the exact thing that he said he was going to do. If we can stop him from doing the exact thing that he said he was going to do, it will require political concessions. It will suck the air out of him. The public itself is standing behind him because they're sick and tired of Brexit. And if they can get rid of Brexit, and they can get meaning the public wants this done with, And so they're supporting Bojo because Bojo say he can get him out on the 31st. But what if Bojo can't get him out on the 31st? There's all the air and support drained away from Bojo. That seemed to be the prevailing narrative. And so when they paroled Parliament, they got him taken to court, got that overturned saying he lied to the Queen. Bojo failed like 7 different votes, meaning they voted the Prime Minister down 7 different votes or taking power away from him. And yet, his public support remained steady. The public, at the very least, knew that the Prime Minister was having due diligence to try to get A, a Brexit deal, and B, get it through. And they knew, beyond everybody else, he meant it. He was a true believer. Boris Johnson said, under no circumstances will I get an extension. So what did Labour and their associates do? They got a bill that forced the Prime Minister to get an extension and to sign that extension, providing the Prime Minister didn't get a deal. He had to send that by law. And he had to go and get that extension and beg and plead for an extension by law, something he said he was never going to do. They went further and said, yeah, it's nice that you got a deal, but that entire deal has to go through before this is allowed to pass. Or otherwise, go and get that extension. Essentially, go and get that extension anyway. Now, again, this is something the Prime Minister said he would never, under any circumstances, do. They got him to do it. Not just got him to do it, he failed. Jeremy Corbyn, opposition parties got what they wanted. They forced Bojo to not be able to get that deal past October 31st. Jeremy Corbyn wins. Problem. The strategy of Corbyn up to this point has been to tie down Boris Johnson. Theresa May would not give Jeremy Corbyn an election, despite him begging for one for 3 years. Bojo gets in office, and Jeremy Corbyn says no elections. Now, with that broken parliament, that fractured parliament, he refused to give Bojo an election under the fig leaf of, we don't trust you in regards to going over the deadline without getting a deal. So we are not going to give you any sort of election until you get a deal. Now, Bojo at this point, 2 strategies. I want to get Brexit through. I want an election. And from early on, you could tell that Bojo wanted an election. There is no prime minister that would allow himself to be crippled in such a way, meaning getting rid of and delisting 20-something members, without, in his head, at least in this very specific instance, wanting an election. He also let the cat out of the bag once before. Jeremy Hunt kept telling him, this guy's going to end up in an election. Why? Because it made no sense, by any terms, that Bojo, with the exact same parliament with Theresa May, was going to get something that Theresa May couldn't get. Bojo also went in this acting thing saying, oh God, I got it. The public doesn't want an election, but we're going to have an election if we need be. Well, after Jeremy Corbyn got what he wanted, after no deal Brexit was off the table, the Prime Minister comes and says, fine, I can't work with this parliament. For the 3rd time, I want an election. Every other party says yes, Labour, we don't want to do that. They don't want to do that because what he knows is this. Boris Johnson Conservatives have a shot in a commanding lead in the latest general election poll for the Independent. Tories put on 4 points over the course of a week to hit 41% in the BMG research survey, 13 points ahead of Labour, down 1 on 28%. Bojo has been leading in the polls consistently, month after month after month, even as he lost in Parliament, and even as the October 31st deadline tripped over, Bojo was still winning. The strategy didn't suck the life out of him, even though it came across that way. It came across as Boris Johnson was working tirelessly to try to deliver Brexit, whatever his reasons. And I'm not taking into account here good, bad, all that stuff. Just gross politics, gross chess. Bojo didn't lose his win after he tripped over that. In fact, the secondary argument that Bojo wanted, meaning he wanted to have an election, got that much stronger after the no deal was taken off the table. The attempt and ability to tie the Prime Minister up worked up until the point where you tripped over and you've accomplished your objective. Congratulations, you've won. You've made the Prime Minister cross over October 31st. Now, you have no answer for him saying you won an election, in which case, Labour, kicking and screaming, bellowing in the moonlight, gets dragged to the election. It's not what they wanted. The polling, again, in this case, has been pretty consistent that Labour was at a disadvantage, particularly going into an election. And now this is what they're stuck with. All of this was the politics and the gamesmanship of the people involved in this process. You can make an argument that from day one, Bojo wanted an election, even though he didn't necessarily say that, and that ultimately ending up in an election is where he wanted to be in the first place. You can also make an account that maybe these guys were being tactical. I mean, I honestly do think Bojo wanted an election from early on. So to some degree, you can make a case that he gets what he wanted, even though he's humiliated in the process for the last few months getting to this point. Here's the catch. Jeremy Corbyn got what he wanted. Now they're in an election. Jeremy Corbyn is now going into an election at a disadvantage from the standpoint of one party is actually trying to get done Brexit, something that we're sick and tired of hearing about and we just want done. One guy is about trying to do that. The other two parties want to just nix it altogether, and Labour can't make up its mind on what it wants to do. Because Labour worries are worse than just being dragged to the election in this case, looking as if they were terrified of going into the election. There's a secondary problem of position going into that election. Labour, tactically, in order to tie the Prime Minister up and to go against him trying to get a deal, makes the argument that any deal that you make needs to be brought to the public for a referendum. Great. If that applies to the Prime Minister, that also applies to you. That also applies to you. The Prime Minister is clear on this. I want to get through Brexit. But that also means that going into this election that they were dragged into, that their position is, and I'm not bullshitting this, we will go to the European Union. A lot of people who are going to negotiate that deal don't want to leave, meaning all of these guys are Remainers. We're going to go to the European Union, and despite not wanting to leave, we're going to come up with a deal. And then we're going to put that deal before the British public for a vote in a referendum. And in that, many of my top benchers, the people who are sitting across from me or with me, are going to lobby against the deal that we went to craft. I, as leader of the opposition, will take no position in this. Meaning the man who got the deal would not take a position on whether or not people should vote for the deal. Labour is a de facto Remain party that doesn't necessarily want to say it's Remain. And this, you can imagine, for people who want to know whether you're going to take us out or whether you're going to keep us in, and Labour is saying, we don't know. They don't have an answer to that question. This election is going to be about Brexit. Despite Labour's manifesto being pretty amazing, this election will be about Brexit. This is Corbyn.
I think being an honest broker and listening to everyone is actually a sign of strength and a sign of maturity. Our country has to come together. We can't go on forever being divided by how people voted in 2016. So a Labour government will negotiate a leave arrangement with the EU that does maintain our trading relationship with our biggest trading bloc, which is Europe. Half of all of our trade goes to Europe, and put that alongside Remain in a referendum within 6 months. And I think
Labour's position when they got elected was Brexit. It was a soft Brexit. But they had in their manifesto that they were going to leave. This position, for all intents and purposes, we're going to go, we're going to get a deal, we're going to put that deal up against staying in the EU, is a de facto stay. It's a de facto Remain. It's kind of like Elizabeth Warren's Medicare for All plan. It's Medicare for all in the sense that it's not Medicare for all. Ultimately, you've created a political chimera. It's a mirage. Ultimately, it's something that you're putting out there that politically is not necessarily going to get to where you're saying it's going to get to. In this case, there's no way they're going to bite on Warren's plan in 3 years. Meaning she essentially just has Pete's plan, a public option. In this case, him saying, we're going to go get a deal, you have no idea what that deal is going to be. That deal could be much, much worse intentionally by people who want to remain so they can put it up there as if a vote took place for the public to remain. This is not an honest broker. And not just an honest broker, it is not an act of strength. It is literally an act of weakness. Do you know that Jeremy Corbyn is a Brexiteer? Did you know that? Did you know that? And not just did you know that, a Brexiteer before any of these people were even talking about Brexiteering. He was a Eurosceptic early on, and he's been cowed by the people in his party. Do you also know that in the European Union, the Jeremy Corbyn couldn't even enact his policies? Meaning the policy objectives that Jeremy Corbyn wants to enact cannot be enacted in the European Union. Yes, I'm aggravated by this. I want Corbyn to win this race. I want Corbyn to win this election, but he's going to need a UFO invasion that is going to, I don't know, do something that freaks people out and they go to Corbyn. Other than that, he has a hard way to go. I've said this for months now. This election is about Brexit. They're sick of tired of hearing about Brexit. And because they're sick and tired of hearing of Brexit, one party is talking about all of these domestic issues that are awesome. Broadband, nationalizing many of the industries like mail, electricity, trains. Like, it's an awesome, awesome platform. It's a platform I'd love to back under a situation where Brexit didn't exist. This election, all of this for the last several years has been singularly about Brexit. Or the items that have taken place over the last several years have been singularly about Brexit. This election is literally here to clarify what Brexit is going to look like. Whether it's going to take the tint of a conservative party or whether it's going to take the tint of just being nixed. And that's kind of the rub. In Labour's case, nobody knows. And because nobody can answer that question from the standpoint of what does Labour stand for on Brexit, is a bell around his throat. This guy who's a Eurosceptic has to run with this dinner bell of a de facto Remain. That doesn't look good. And that is somewhat problematic. And you can make an argument that all of this came from the political tactics and wranglings that have taken place in the context of this election. They wanted to stop Bojo. Great. How do you stop Bojo from leaving on the 31st? Maybe one of the political tactics is force a second referendum on his particular bill, knowing that that second referendum, his bill would likely get voted down. Not to mention, he would never own up to it. The Conservative Party would never own up to that, considering they were the party that put Brexit on the agenda in the first place. So you can tie the Prime Minister down. You don't want him to leave on the 31st, so you do everything you can to stop him to leave on the 31st. He does everything he can to leave on the 31st. And your problem becomes optics. The public sees one guy trying to leave, the party sees everybody else, and the public sees everybody else trying to stop him. And you accomplish your objective, missing the point that the second objective, or maybe even the first objective, was to have an election so he can get a parliament that allows him to do what he wanted to do. In this case, you have a public that looks at a prime minister that says he wants to leave and is trying to do everything in his power to do it. And when he can't leave, to stand strong and say, I won an election. I want the public to give me the fires of approval. And the public sees the other party does not just doing everything it can to stop Brexit, but also seemingly terrified of an election. The politics of the second referendum and stopping Bojo from doing what he wants to do, not to mention the Remainers in his background, has forced Labour into a bizarre position politically that if they become in power, they are going to vote down their own deal. I mean, it's ludicrous. And now they're in an election that they don't necessarily want, they got dragged into, and that they're going to have a hard way to make a case about to win, especially since all of this, the entirety of this election is going to be about Brexit. I'll leave this here. I don't want this one to be long. I just wanted to give a heads up on what has been taking place. Like, share, subscribe. And by the way, this is me saying, I hope Corbyn wins. I hope Corbyn wins. But for the last few months, it seems to be a ludicrous position to me to vote against your own deal, or for the Prime Minister to not have an opinion on his own deal. That seems bizarre. The SNP seems that they're going to join in line with Jeremy Corbyn, and now he said that he's going to have potentially another vote for Scotland. So not only are they going to have a referendum, but they're also going to have a secondary vote for Scotland on top of that referendum. It just seems to be a difficult, if not ludicrous, position for a public that wants to know, are you going to leave or are you going to stay? And it seems that Labour cannot answer that question. And because it can't answer that question, they're continuously hit with that, considering they're in an election that is almost entirely about Brexit. Like, share, subscribe.